two hats today. This must be thank you. I am actually an assistant professor at Coppin State University. Education. I'm good, Roger. How are you? It's good to see you. And you have a math program?
No.
No.
I worked in education for about 30 years. I used to teach and taught all the time. And I've been on my own, self-employed for about 7 years. And most of it I've been consulting, giving talks, and it's inclusive of things like math and STEM and English. So I taught, you can't substitute teaching, I taught everything. My certification in English social studies and
Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello? Is this on? Is it on now? Hello? Oh. We're going to start in just a minute. I would ask everybody to please take a seat, and there are lots of seats right up front. Where are my A+ students? Fill in the front. Come on down. I'm looking at you guys in the very, very back. You don't need to be up there. Come on down.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started so that we can stay on schedule. Thank you very much. Good morning and welcome, everyone. I am Harold Henry, the Chief of Schools here at Baltimore Curriculum Project, and we want to thank you. It's probably Frederick people, but thank you. Again, we want to welcome you as we celebrate, as we host another event to celebrate the 30 years of BCP. For 30 years, yes, you can clap for that. BCP has been committed to Baltimore, powered by purpose, and focused on the future. Leading Minds is one of BCP's signature events, which we use for the professional development of our staff and as a general opportunity to bring all schools together for shared learning and collaboration. We also use a portion of this day during the event to invite influential and knowledgeable partners to share information and insights on issues that impact our work. We are delighted to welcome our esteemed panel, who will be introduced shortly. As I mentioned, this event is one of many exciting events we have planned this year to celebrate BCP's 30th anniversary. During this academic year, we have hosted other events such as the screening of the documentary short film Restorative Practices Make Strong Schools, which highlighted 2 of our schools and their work with restorative practices. Volunteer days in each of our schools, which some have passed and some are still ongoing and coming up. This event, and then our signature Are You Smarter event coming up this spring. BCP was founded with purpose to support the improvement of educational outcomes in neighborhood schools in Baltimore City.
That work continues due to the effort of each and every one of you in attendance today. So a special shout out to our school leaders whose visions are what make our schools thrive and realize continuous improvement and outcomes for students and families. Let's give it up for the principals and assistant principals. Also, a shout out to our teachers whose dedication, innovation, and skill help students reach remarkable achievements every day. Shout out to the teachers. And then a shout out to all support staff, all other staff who support the vision and further the mission of Baltimore Curriculum Project as well as your individual schools. Give yourselves a hand. We are excited to host you all this year in this space, and we appreciate the staff here at the Maritime Conference Center for having us. So on behalf of BCP, our staff, whose behind the scenes work make BCP the standard of charter operators in Baltimore City, I welcome you all. Please enjoy today's learning experiences. Before we get started, we welcome you to participate in this morning's session, and we will be using a platform called Slido this year to collect questions electronically. So, is there a QR? No. There we go. Right, so take a moment to scan the QR code, and throughout the presentation, you are able to submit your questions, which will then be given to the moderator during the Q&A session of the panel discussion. In the interest of time, because we are on a schedule, we may not be able to answer all questions, but please still submit questions because there may be something that we have an opportunity to follow up with you all on at a later time. So again, welcome and enjoy the day. Thank you. I'm sorry. Please welcome me and please join me in welcoming our President and CEO, Laura Doherty. Yes, thank you. She is going to present a special award for us today and also introduce our moderator.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to my favorite professional development day of the year. It is such a pleasure to see so many people that I love and admire, and am so grateful that they're part of our BCP family. I want to especially shout out Brianna, BCP, for organizing this massive event. You do a great job. And if you just read the emails, it's all in there, I promise. I just read the emails. Right, Brianna? Yes. All right. It is my chance also today to thank you from the bottom of my heart, like Harold did, for working in our schools. Nothing is more important to our world than nurturing and educating our young people, and you all do it so well every day. The Brenda Kahn Award is a recognition of one of you great teachers. The award is in memory of a BCP coach who passed away in 2019 of lung cancer at age 49. She was a few years shy. She'd been a lifer. She came in right after college, and she was a few years shy of hitting that 30-year mark. We've missed her ever since. She was a particularly effective classroom teacher and then a coach, and we came up with this award to honor an educator who exemplifies her level of dedication, preparedness, and success and joy in teaching. This year's winner of the Brenda Kahn Award is Ashley Green from Wall Street Academy. Come on down, Ashley, while I talk about you. Come on. I know you're here. Where'd you go? Yeah, all right. I'm going to say a few words about Ashley. Ashley brings the same passion to coaching that she had as an outstanding third grade teacher at Wall Street. She supports the teachers from pre-K through fifth grade in all content areas. She is compassionate yet honest with all teachers and does an outstanding job collaborating with her colleagues, Rachel and Katrina, to seamlessly support staff at Wall Street. Ashley is open to feedback to continue to improve her teaching and learning. She is an amazing mom to a very active and talented Hampstead Hill 8th grader. All right, so Ashley's up here. We're going to take a picture with the big check. Oh, yeah, there's a $1,000 prize.
She told me to come up. Brianna told me to come up.
Good. Oh, for a pic.
She told me.
And there, along with the check, equally exciting, is the a lovely marble-based, what do we call this? A trophy. There you go. Thank you, Ashley. Okay. Okay. All right, so now I get to introduce Alison Perkins-Cohen. Now, you can read all about her. She has just a really killer resume, just so much. I'm sure you all know that she has been the chief of staff for city schools for 10 years. She is Dr. Sonia Santelisa's partner in all of these things. She's had a major role in shaping the blueprint, which has increased funding for our schools. She, along with Dr. Santelisa's, oversaw the unprecedented building of, let's just call it 30 new schools in Baltimore City. And, oh yeah, she led brilliantly through COVID, the once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. So talk about someone who's had a major impact on every single one of us. Many of you, though, may not know that some time ago she was the executive director of the Baltimore Curriculum Project. I still take great comfort in all of the policies she wrote back when she was writing policies, and we still use most of them. We have to put a new date on them every now and then, but it was Alison's work, and I take great comfort in that. And guess what? Leading Minds was her brainchild. So welcome back, Alison. We really love you and appreciate you, and there's your introduction. Come on up.
The best introduction, and it is the best kind of, I'm going to be leaving when Sonia leaves, and so to be able to be home at BCP in my last 6 months is really a treasure. Baltimore Curriculum Project is such a special place. As Harold said, you really are the standard bearer for charter operators in the state. And we, Dr. Santelisa's and I, rely on you heavily. The caliber of what you do, the caliber of the coaching that you offer, the caliber of the academics that you offer children, the caliber of the environments that you provide young people. You've increased student outcomes. You've improved the culture in these schools. They are some of the strongest schools we have. And you do it with grace, you do it with intelligence, you do it with partnership. You are just tremendous partners. So if we ever have a school that we're concerned about, that's rocky, that we need help with, you are one of the first organizations, Laura's one of the first people we call to come and help us, and has done that many, many times. Never shies away from a challenge, never shies away from taking a school and making it better. One that we haven't served students well enough with. You guys take it, you make it better. You've never stopped doing that. So very grateful to you. I will say, Laura didn't tell you that I was executive director. That was back in the day when it took two of us to do the job that Laura does by herself. We couldn't actually do it. So there was an executive director and a president, and now Laura does that all herself. Also, I think it's a bit of a departure for me to be out today so close to a snowstorm. As the person who makes the snow calls, I generally don't get out into a room this big of teachers and principals without a disguise. I left my glasses and nose in the car, so my fake nose in the car. So please, I hope the Hornbeck brothers have my back when I try to get out of here today. appreciate you all and your dedication to students and being back, because it is so important. So 30 years for Baltimore Curriculum Project. It's hard to believe. I started in 2004 at Baltimore Curriculum Project, so I wasn't there for the full 30, but for a lot of it. And I was kind of asked to set the stage by talking a little bit about the history in the last 30 years of education. And I'm going to focus more on Baltimore, and I'm actually going to go back a little bit further than 30 years, because I think the trajectory of how much Baltimore has changed is really important stage setting in terms of kind of where we are today and where we find ourselves with some of the challenges that we have and some of the successes that we have too. So I don't think you really understand where we are with Baltimore City unless you go back a little bit further. So if you go back 60 years to 1965, and you look at what Baltimore was like then, it was a much larger city. It was 918,000 people in Baltimore City at that time. The school system at that time had 192,000 students, much bigger. A little bit after that came the 70s, and came requirements to integrate schools and a lot of white flight, a lot of white middle-class families moving to the suburbs. And so then come 1995, the school system the city went from 918,000 families or people, to 701,000 in that short period of time. So it's almost a 25% decrease in that period of time. The school system then went down to from 192,000 in 65 to 110,000 in 1995. So that's a 43% decrease in the school system. Now in 2025, there's 568,000 people living in Baltimore, and we have a school system that saw the first increase last year in a long time. It's been decreasing. Last year we saw a 1,000 student increase, and we're about flat this year. We lost about 400 students, but we're at 76,000 students now. But that's a precipitous decrease from where we were. And so those changes are really important. We've also recently, one thing we've really also been aware of recently is that in the early part of Dr. Santelises' tenure, we were losing, the main population we were losing was black families. And we've been really trying to stabilize that, and we have reduced it significantly, but we were losing middle-class black families. So we were working hard to kind of reverse that trend, because that's a really problematic trend that we're losing these families. So but the population of Baltimore in that time also changed in terms of the demographic makeup, as I talked about white flight. So in 1965, the city was 35% African American, and by 1995, it was 60% African American. So that change in both the size, so the size impacts our representation in the legislature. So we drastically dropped from, I thought I have it down, I think from around 30 delegates in 1965 to, I think we have 14 now. So that has a profound impact on our ability to affect change and to influence folks, as well as the demographics change. It became political to fund Baltimore City as opposed to just what it should be, which is it should be something, quality education should be something everybody's entitled to, and that became a change after the 70s. So, so much so that in 1994, the ACLU filed a lawsuit, the Bradford lawsuit, about the fact that the state was not meeting their constitutional obligation to make sure that every student in Baltimore had an adequate education. And so that lawsuit was partly, there was a number of things that came out of it, including the charter movement came out of it. So BCP was one of the first entities in the state that had a charter school, they were in the first class of schools that did that. But the other thing that came out of it was the Thornton formula, so the precursor to Kirwan was in 2004, and that was monumental change as well, and funded students based on need and drove resources to students that had certain characteristics of need. But the challenge with Thornton was that it was only funded. It had, like Kirwan does, I mean, we're really in a deja vu period here. It was funded with statutory increases planned for it over the years, because, you know, obviously people often don't want to pay for the cost up front, so they they implemented over a period of years. And by 2007, when the recession hit, they just stopped inflating it. So between 2007 and 2018, or 2016, I guess I'll go back to that, when Dr. Santelises and I started, it was held flat. So during that period of time, Baltimore City schools, and again, just one other important difference that I want you to understand about a city versus counties is that in the United States, most of our education funding comes from local property taxes. And cities, by design, don't have local property taxes at the same rate. People think of it as being an issue of poverty, and poverty is a factor, but the bigger issue is that we just don't have the land mass where property tax is attached to. So over a third of our square footage or square miles in Baltimore is entities like universities, hospitals, nonprofits, foundations, government buildings, courthouses that don't pay taxes, property taxes, and so there's just not the same standard of resources available to pay into property taxes, and so the state really has to make up that gap. That's their job, and that's what Bradford was about, is that they really have to make up the gap between the amount of resources that is given via property taxes versus in one jurisdiction versus another. And they just haven't been doing that. So Kerwin is the process to try to make that up, but it too inflates over time. And so we fought last year and got it to continue to inflate. There was a threat to it, but I think it'll be a real challenge. And one of the things I think we have to look for the future is whether it's going to continue to inflate. Other key things that I think we should mention in the last 30 years, one of the things that Laura mentioned was the 21st Century Schools. That was an initiative that, through advocacy from, I'm sure, a lot of you in this room and parents, and ACLU was really at the lead of that. We did get the right to finance improvements to buildings. Nobody gave us anything. So I think one thing we should hear, kind of again with the politics of education in Baltimore, is that Baltimore got something there. Baltimore didn't really get anything. We got the right to take money out of classrooms to finance bonds to improve buildings, and we were desperate enough that we needed to do that. It's not the ideal. You don't see people taking that amount of money out of classrooms in many places, but the condition of our buildings was such that we had to do that. That predates me being chief of staff, but I was in O&I at the Office of New Initiatives at the time when we did that. Could you not hear me the whole time? That sounded really loud. Should I start over? Laura was the, no? Okay. So what was I saying? Anyway, so that 21st century piece of legislation was critical, and we have, you can see it around the city. When you drive around the city, you see those new buildings. Most of those are places where had the pleasure of being in the Office of New Initiatives when we wrote the 10-year plan that was the basis of the 21st century, and one thing we prioritized there, Michael Sarbanes was part of that effort, and he's a treasurer, and was lucky to work with him on that. One of the things we prioritized was that Baltimore, because of that population decline that you just heard about, there was many, many more schools than were needed in terms of the population. And we couldn't maintain all those schools because of the gap I just talked about in property taxes. And so we had to make up for that gap. And the way we did that, the way we addressed it in 21st century was we had to close some of those schools. There was just no way to support them all, and they weren't providing the quality of education that students deserve. But what we theorized in that plan was that the schools that in the neighborhoods had been historically underfunded. Most of those neighborhoods are in what we know as the Black Butterfly in Baltimore, the areas that had been redlined. That's where we put the new buildings. So when you drive around the city, you see most of those 21st century investments are schools that absorb students from a closing school. And that's been a really important investment. There is so much more to do, and if you want to have me come back another time to talk about buildings, I could do it till I'm blue in the face, because it's one of the things that is weighs on me most heavily, is that we have so much more to do to do right by students. The last couple things I'll just mention quickly is that since Dr. Santelises came, so we're 10 years since Dr. Santelises started, 19, it does seem like that. In dog years, I think that's actually how long it is that we've been doing this. In 2016, that was at the height of really major financial challenges. The first year that we started, there was a $130 million funding gap identified. Again, we were in that tail years of the Thornton formula not being increased, and so we had to really advocate again. Losing that political clout in Annapolis meant that we really had to build relationships in order to get things done and get money funded for the school system. But so using it, having not having enough does focus the mind, and you really prioritize things. And so through her leadership at the beginning, and then we actually have resources now to implement some of these things, we really focused on critical investments like early learning. So our KRA rates are outperforming the state in many categories and have for the last several years. Our literacy has increased dramatically. Same with our math performance. It has a long way to go, but we are seeing improvements there. Access to critical things like rigorous education, like AP courses, and not just, and what's unique in Baltimore is that we've drastically increased access while we've also increased performance. Usually when you increase access, I think 300% more of our students of color are participating in our AP courses than did 10 years ago, and yet we've seen 150% increase in our outcomes and the number of students getting a qualifying score. So that's unusual to have both expanded access and expanded performance. And then our graduation rates are up, and enrollment, like I said, last year for the first time in many, many years did actually increase. That is tied to a trend that you all know about, which is the change in the Hispanic population. And that has just changed dramatically. In 1965, it was 1%. Our Hispanic population in Baltimore was 1%. That didn't change very much. By like the 2000s or so, it was still 1995, it was still about 1%, so it hadn't changed at all. By 2015, it was 5%, and now it's 20%. And so that those changes were really important and helped make sure they're one of the reasons why our population did go up, and that's the sole really reason why our population went up last year. This year, it's the sole reason it went down is because the population didn't go up because of the national context that we're all too familiar with. And then I think the last thing I would say was that COVID, because I think when Ken speaks, like that was a seismic change for everybody in terms of how we provide education. We had to think so differently about it. We really pushed to try to get back as soon as we could from COVID, and we did get back as soon as we could. I wish it had been sooner, but in the meantime, we had to figure out ways to teach students remotely, and so that was. That was, I think, we're still learning from that, and we're still applying lessons learned from that in terms of how we approach learning. I'm supposed to be probably moving slides. Is that true? I didn't have any slides myself, but okay, good. Just Roger. I didn't have to do anything wrong. Okay, great. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Roger Schulman, who's a tremendous partner to us, and he's going to talk about his work at the Fund for Educational Excellence. He started as a teacher in TFA, right? And he's been just a tremendous partner to us. In that first year when Sonia and I started and we had such an enormous gap, we realized quickly that one of the things we had to do was really get serious and strategic about how to develop partnerships and fundraise in order to fill gaps. And Roger has been just an instrumental, irreplaceable partner in that work. So with that.
Hello, everybody. Let's see if I can figure this out. Okay. So, really quickly, my name is Roger Schulman. I'm the president of the Fund for Educational Excellence. As Alison said, I was a teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools in the late 1900s. To this day, I still have anxiety dreams about going into a classroom, being unprepared. And I had that dream last night about this presentation. I present not infrequently, and there is no group that makes me more anxious to present in front of than teachers. So bear with me. I was like, I'm going to change a bunch of things in this presentation. But so please be patient with me. For those of you who don't know, the Fund for Educational Excellence is the local education fund here in Baltimore. We support the school system in a number of different ways, all ultimately aimed at trying to improve the educational experience for students in the school system. One of the ways that we do that is we go out and we talk to families and students in large numbers around very specific topics. And we try to understand how students and families and communities are experiencing different aspects of the school system. We also try to recognize what's working inside the school system through the Heart of the Schools, which is a year-long effort to celebrate principals and educators for the incredible work that they do inside of schools. But what I'm really here to talk to you about today is this third part of what we do, a very important part of what we do, which is how do we access resources for the school system. Alison just talked a lot about how important the financial resources are for what a school system needs, and the fund tries to be a partner to the school system to attract philanthropic resources. So for over 40 years, the fund has been working closely with the school system to secure and manage philanthropic resources. This slide just represents some of the current local and national funders who have projects that they are supporting inside of Baltimore City Public Schools right now. So there are two things that are true. One, philanthropy inside a school system really matters. Philanthropic dollars play a very, very important part in advancing work inside the school system. The second thing is that they are a relatively small part of the overall picture. So the school system's budget is about $1.7 billion a year. We maybe raise in private dollars, it's very hard to count because it depends on how you count, and when I try to explain that to people, they're like, just count it. And I'm like, it's not that easy, but it's somewhere around $7 million in investment. So when you think about $7 million in the context of $1.7 billion, it seems very, very small, but the impact of those dollars can be very significant. And so when I think about why philanthropic resources matter, there are three things that I think a lot about and how they can be used. The first is that they advance and accelerate innovation. When you look at big systems in a city, and it's not just school systems, it's health departments, it's any major system, they weren't actually built to innovate. And the dollars that it takes to maintain the core operating work of a system the size of Baltimore City Public Schools is huge. And when you think about $1.7 billion, and then you think about, correct me if I'm wrong, 80% of that is salary and benefits, what's left is what you have to work with. The philanthropic dollars become a higher percentage of that work. Often the philanthropic dollars are more flexible than the public dollars that are available. Public dollars come with lots of requirements, as they should. They are taxpayer dollars. Philanthropic dollars come with the restrictions or not that a funder puts on it, so it allows greater flexibility. And lastly, philanthropic dollars can help in emergency situations. They can help with urgent matters that need to be addressed quickly. So when I think about this and how this plays out, there are three ways in which I think philanthropy comes into a school system. One is through the direct financial support of system-wide efforts. The second is through direct support of schools. And then the third, which we talk about a little bit less, is support for the key partners that are working inside a school system or at schools. And in listening to Alison talk and in thinking about this over the last couple of days, part of what I've been trying to think a little bit about is how has this changed over my time in Baltimore? And how does it ebb and flow? And where does philanthropy where are they trying to, for better or worse, drive the agenda, and when are they responding to the current circumstances that districts are talking about? And I'm going to talk a little bit about where I think the successes and failures of that are. But just to give some examples, financial support for district-wide efforts. These are just a few of some of the system-wide efforts that philanthropy is helping to support right now in Baltimore City Public Schools. Everything that's on this list, I'm making sure what I'm saying is right. is work that has come under Dr. Santelises' leadership. It's priorities that Dr. Santelises, that Alison, that the chiefs, that principals have decided are important to have in this school system and couldn't happen without it. I think what's interesting to think about is when I first came to Baltimore in 1992, this wasn't happening. Philanthropy was not supporting system-wide work. They were supporting outside partners that were doing work inside of the school system. They were sometimes providing work that was happening outside schools, but they didn't actually believe that change was happening at a system level and that philanthropic dollars could actually help move the system. And this has been a tremendous shift in the last 30 years. And that is not to say that it's all been great, right? It doesn't always work out the way that we think it's going to. The first very significant investment I can think about into the system as a whole in my time in Baltimore was in about 1998, 1999. It was the Gates Foundation first significant investment in education. One of their first grants was to Baltimore City Public Schools. It was $12 million, which was matched by $8 million in local philanthropic dollars. And for those of you who have been around for a while, you'll remember those dollars were used to break up our large comprehensive high schools, Southwestern, Northern, Lake Clifton, into smaller learning academies. So each of those high schools became 4 or 5 smaller schools. We spent about $20 million on that work, and it didn't do what we thought it was going to do, right? Oh, Irma will. Irma can speak to it probably better than I can. Sorry, Irma. It didn't do what we thought it was going to do. It doesn't mean it was a failure. There were lessons learned. There were things we learned from that. But it was $20 million, and there's very little sort of remnants of it in our system now, except for that everything builds upon everything. So investment in systems is relatively new. There are plenty of opportunities to invest directly in schools. There are lots of ways in which schools are leading the charge, where they are trying new things that become proof points for schools, and funders are interested in funding those kinds of opportunities. They're big and they're small, right? So sometimes it's just I don't mean to say just, it's a beautification project that really matters to a school. What an entryway to a building looks like matters to a school. It's not a huge project, but there aren't dollars for it inside a system, and there aren't flexible school dollars, so philanthropy can help do that. Sometimes schools are the right place to try something new, and funders or schools want to try it in their school and need philanthropic dollars to do it. So that's another place where philanthropy is investing. And the third that I mentioned before is key support to district partners and school partners. And this one is really interesting to me on a couple of different levels. One is this becomes a little bit of I think there's a little bit of a debate about this, because if you look at some of these partners and many, many more over the years, if you're a school leader, if you work inside a school, you can say, well, what do you mean philanthropy supports that? We pay for that partnership, right? We have a contract with them to deliver something, whether that's a system-wide contract or a school-based contract. What is often the case is that that is a fraction of what it actually costs to deliver that project. And philanthropy, on the other side of the equation, is funding those partners in a different way, so that when you look at the actual cost, it varies how much of that is actually being paid by school system resources, again, whether that's school-based or central office-based, versus philanthropic resources. The other piece that I find interesting about this is how this ebbs and flows and when it ebbs and flows. So we've had Dr. Santelises as our CEO for 10 years. We are about to go through a period of transition. My prediction would be these organizations start to get a lot more money in the next 6 months and in the first 6 months of next year, because people want to support the school system, but they are waiting to see what is going to happen in the school system. And philanthropy, for all their flexibility, is a little bit risk averse. And when they want to support the school system but don't know exactly how to do it, they tend to go back to who they consider to be the stable, critical partners to the district. And whether or not you view that as supporting the district or not is an interesting question, and one I find interesting to watch that ebb and flow and how that all works. So I do want to talk about, I hope I'm okay on time, I'm going to do 2 quick case studies about when I think this works really well, when philanthropy really helps advance the work of the district, and when it is, frankly, a failure. So early on, before there was the blueprint for the state, Dr. Santelises had a blueprint for Baltimore City Public Schools, and she in her first year, towards the end of her first year, had articulated 3 really clear priorities. Those priorities had implementation plans, they had significant district resources allocated to them, and the district was moving forward with this work. And at the same time, a very large national funder had issued an RFP that had really clear alignment to one of the priorities. And so the fund and the school system decided we should apply for, or respond to that RFP. And there were 2 tiers in that RFP. You could get a planning grant that was for $500,000, and most of the grants were going to be in that $500,000 range. And then they were going to allocate 5 implementation grants that were more like $15 million. So we worked really hard on this application, and we were like, we are applying for a planning grant. That's what makes sense for us. And we had lots of conversations with the foundation, site visits, interviews, and through the whole time, one of the things I found really, really impressive about the district was that they were very steadfast in saying, we are not adjusting this work to meet the needs of the RFP. Our work is what it is, our priority is what it is, and we're going to maintain it. And if we get the grant, great, and if we don't, we still believe this is the right work. And so the outcome of this was, and I remember this very, very well, Alison and Dr. Santelises and my colleague Kevin and I were in a room on a video call with the foundation, who told us in a video call that we were one of the 5 awardees of an implementation grant. So we thought we were getting we were hoping we were going to get $500,000, and we got 4 years and $13 million to implement the work. Sorry, I mean, that's great. And it was an amazing room to be in when it happened.
And thankfully it wasn't a video because we were dancing.
We were, that's true. Oh, that's right, it was a conference call. But what came of that was an ongoing relationship with a national funder who, because of the success of that project, has funded 2 more projects inside the school system at a significant level, and has created a very important relationship and has accelerated and advanced the work of the blueprint in a way the district simply could not have done without those funds. And it has had a significant impact, I think, on the district's reputation nationally and brought in other national funders to Baltimore. So the second case study was that City Schools was approached by a national funder who was interested in providing $3 million to the system. And that funder came and said, we will give you this money, but you have to work with these 3 partners. You can design the project with them, but you have to work with these 3 partners. And by the way, they were 3 partners that at the time the district was already working with, so it's not like they were bad partners, but they were saying you had to work with these 3 partners to get the money. And it took months and months and months to come to an agreement with the district, the funder, and the 3 partners on what the scope of work of this project would be. But the grant was ultimately awarded. What I would say was the outcome of this, though, was that it wasn't work the district really wanted to do. It wasn't, frankly, work the partners really wanted to do. And the outcome was $3 million got spent, a ton of time got spent, and again, very, very little came out of it that is advancing the work of the district, right? So philanthropic dollars are important, but they're not always the right thing for a district at a given time. And it was probably a mistake that we pursued those dollars, right? So just to wrap it up, just some lessons that I feel like I've learned is that it is critical to pursue funding that aligns with your priorities, right? There are national trends, and foundations are very susceptible to national trends. Those trends may not match your priorities, right? It is much better to turn down funding, much better to turn down funding than to accept funding you don't actually want or need. because it is not going to go well, and the relationships will be harmed. You're going to end up doing work you don't want to do, and it's not going to advance your work at all. And then finally, if you take money, you got to execute the work you said you were going to do. You've got to do what you say you're going to do. You have to report on it. You have to document it, which does not mean that it has to have worked the way you thought. But you have to have learned from it. You have to be able to explain what you've learned from it. And I think if you do these things well, philanthropy can add a tremendous amount of value to any work that you're doing, and certainly inside a public system. So I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Roger. And before we get to Dr. Irma Johnson, I just want to ask you one question. So with all that background, which is really helpful, as you think about the transition we have, if we're looking forward, and we think about the transition we have coming up, how do you create a smooth transition? And I know we're all thinking about this, we're trying to figure this out, but could you talk a little bit about how you're thinking about creating a smooth transition to create that synergy that has been there the whole time that Dr. St. Felicitas and I have been there, and make sure we don't lose it, so that, because like the example of the Gates Grant didn't just like fund the key priorities for us for our blueprint, but then our blueprint was very influential to the Maryland blueprint. There's a lot of similarities in the Maryland blueprint in terms of what we were already doing, and so that Gates Grant was really a catalyst for a lot, and so that kind of investment, to your point, small in the scheme of things, but large in terms of impact. How do you think about approaching a transition to make sure that that can continue?
Sure. I mean, in addition to this conference, that is what keeps me up at night. It's a great question that we are thinking about all the time. I think the 10 years that we've just gone through, where we can show the ways, exactly what you just said, the ways in which philanthropy has helped advance the work of the district in really meaningful ways, and how that has an impact across the state. And frankly, across other districts. I know that other districts are looking to Baltimore on really important topics to see how we've done things. Really making it clear to whoever the next CEO is how this relationship has worked, because you don't just get this money. There has been a methodology to the way in which the district has approached its partnership with the fund, and frankly, the way the fund has approached its partnership with the district, and codifying that and understanding what were the conditions for success that led to that, I think is really important, and how we tell that story and to whom is really important. I think one of the challenges, not to make this about the fund, but that is hard for the, but I'm going to, but that is hard for the fund, is we really try to do our work from behind the scenes, right? We want it's the district's work. I think our role is really important, but we're not out touting the role we play, which then means in a time of transition, how do you explain it to someone else? And I do think our partnership has been critical to securing these funds. And I think it's really, really important. And just the last thing I'll say on this is, we are also in a really interesting time in philanthropy, because like many other parts of our society right now, philanthropy is under attack for the kinds of things they fund. And it has made foundations much more cautious. They don't want to fund something that could be deemed whatever by whoever, and figuring out how to navigate that with a new team here is going to be part of the challenge.
Great. Thank you so much, Roger. Now it's my pleasure to turn to the conversation to Dr. Irma Johnson, who, Irma, I feel like would have been the obvious choice to give the history of Baltimore City schools, because she worked for city schools for 40 years. She is a historian. She knows about Baltimore. She's lived Baltimore, and she's been an expert in Baltimore City schools for 40 years. She's an assistant professor of education and leadership at Coppin State University, and is currently a member of the Maryland State Board of Education, where she's helping guide implementation of Maryland's blueprint. And so really, when we're thinking about how to look forward in terms of what's coming and how do we plan for it, Irma is an expert to help us navigate that.
Gee, thanks, Alison. It is my pleasure to be with you this morning, and a lot of my friends are here, and I'm so happy to see them. I was appointed to the Maryland State Board of Education by Governor Moore in 2023, and my tenure ends in 2027. And I just wanted to share with you that members of the Board of Education in the state, for the first time, many of us are educators. And that's a very, very important fact, because we look at our positions and our work with the lens of an educator. So we're really happy that we're able to support the state schools. Now, Alison and Roger zoomed in terms of Baltimore City. I want you to zoom out with me in terms of what's happening in the state. The state has many initiatives that they're looking at, but I want to share with you 4 of the major initiatives. One is academic excellence, the Academic Excellence Program. The second is the State School Accountability System Development, Comprehensive Pre-K through 3 Literacy Framework, and the Pre-K through 12 Math Policy Pathways. Those are the 4 that I want to share with you today. The Academic Excellence Program comes about as a result of a study that was done by Wallace and Hub this year, where they rank the 50 states as well as DC. What they found was in 2024, Maryland ranked number 3. However, in 2025, Maryland dropped to 9th place. So even though Baltimore City has been doing well, the entire state is not. And the areas that we dropped in were standardized testing, the 4th and 8th grade in reading and math. We dropped in high school graduation rates. We dropped in college readiness indicators. Our students are not doing well on their AP exams, and also we dropped in our, the number of students who are scoring proficient on the test. Now, it's amazing that Ms. Green, where's Ms. Green again? Raised your hand. Well, one of the things that they've done, and you may be happy about this in terms of looking at what can we do to make sure that we increase the academic achievement of our students, is coaches, Ms. Green. So Maryland, at this point, Maryland has decided that in order to make sure our children are receiving the type of education that we want them to have, and also that our teachers, and I really applaud our teachers, but one thing that I found out as a principal is that if you want to have smart children, you must have smart teachers. And teachers who become smart work collaboratively with coaches. So Maryland has decided that in order for us to improve the academic achievement of our students is to get together high-quality coaches so that those coaches will be in classrooms, not just in team meetings, but in classrooms, working with our teachers and aligning that work to the science of reading. That these coaches will be there to support teachers in embedded professional development, being in the classrooms with them in a non-evaluative position will help our teachers gain the instructional support and needs that they need to improve the academic performance. And the budget that they've allotted for this effort is $10.9 million that will be implemented in 2027. MSDE, Roger, has gone the way that you have talked about in terms of philanthropic funding, that they got $5.8 million in philanthropic funding, that they will be actually doing a pilot, launching a pilot in Prince George's County to have actually infuse 22 coaches in those schools that are low-performing schools to help the teachers become more effective in their instruction. So the first bullet point that I want to point out to you is that we must, it is so imperative that we improve the academic achievement of all of our students. And Maryland, the State Board of Education, that becomes our focus. Our second focus, our second focus is on creating a Maryland accountability system. How many of you understand the standards? The math standards, the reading standards. Just raise your hand. Understand? Yeah, okay. Most of us. We've done a good job with that, don't you think? Yes? No? Yes? No? Okay. So we've done a great job with those standards. And in the past, when we looked at the standards, we had to do something called unpacking the standards. Well, with the new standards that you've received, you don't have to unpack them. They have already been unpacked for you. So you don't have to sit in your team meetings and try to figure out, oh, what do they mean here? What do they mean there? You don't have to do that. But what we need to do is create an accountability system that will really determine how well schools are doing. We have a 5-star accountability system. I know that Hampstead Hill is a 5-star. Your principal tells me, you know I'm a 5-star school. However, there are complaints about that rating. They're saying that, does it really, really measure what we want to measure? Now, the federal government has indicated that one of the standards that we have, and that standard around curriculum, does not really fit what they deem to be appropriate. And I'll go into that a little bit further. But people have complained about our accountability rating, that they really don't understand it, it's not useful, they don't exactly know what we're trying to do with that. So the State Board of Education, along with members of the Board of Education staff, we have come up with a committee, and that committee consists of superintendents, teachers, principals, assistant principals, and other stakeholders at looking at the accountability system to see how we can amend or we can revise it so it is a meaningful tool that we can use to actually improve and continue to improve our schools. So relooking at our accountability system is the second major initiative of MSDE. We also needed to look at some of the targeted statutory rates that we've done. you can bring those up. And I really want to share these policies with you. The first one is, I talked a little bit about this, is that ESSA compliance. And that ESSA compliance deals with our accountability rating. And the U.S. Department of Ed said because they don't understand what a well-rounded curriculum means, that we have to do something about that. It doesn't differentiate enough for each one of the different schools. The other is the blueprint funding amendment. Now, Alison, I heard you talk about the blueprint and the funding. Well, I need you to know that the Excellence in Maryland Public School Act, which is Senate Bill 49 and House Bill 504, freezes multiple per pupil funding to the 2026 formula. So what impact will that have on your schools? You'll be faced with not really getting all of the money that we're used to getting in our schools, because we know that each year it costs more money to fund our programs adequately for the children in our programs. But that money has been frozen. The new accountability matrix that was Senate Bill 429 requires the Accountability and Implement Board, that's the AIB, to come up with new metrics for, and those metrics need to align with the blueprint. The third is the accountability reassignment. That task force and advisory council has recommended upgrades to growth models, indicating definitions of aggregations and rules and performance levels. So we're truly trying to move from just looking at proficient levels, but looking at students' growth. And that should be a major indication of how you look at your data when you're sitting in your team meetings or your ILT. And lastly, we're looking at teacher workforce amendment, and that's Senate Bill 429, indicates statutory changes entering Maryland into the Interstate Teacher Mobility Compact. What happened is that at one time there was reciprocity. I know when I came out of the University of Maryland, I could go to any district up and down the East Coast and still would be certified. For some reason that stopped, and we know that people are really mobile, so Maryland is entering into this compact with the other states up and down the district so that it's more easy for us to go out and recruit. Because Maryland is not a state that produces a lot of teachers. We actually go out and recruit from other states. So it makes it easier for your principals and ILTs to hire teachers to come into Maryland to teach. Okay. The third initiative that the Maryland State Board of Education is looking at is our literacy program. We have, and I know that you still use direct instruction, right? Direct instruction. So you're really already ahead of the game, right? Because it's going back and looking at phonics and phonemic awareness and really of the skills that you all teach, but looking again at the science of reading. It's not new that some of us old folk know, count myself in that the best way to teach young people how to read is through phonemic and phonetic analysis. So everything that's new is old. So we're just kind of going back to what we knew were good practices in terms of the science of reading. Maryland has implemented this program throughout the state. The key to this is that we're not telling individual districts what to teach. We've given them, if you go online, there is a list of instructional practices that are research-based, that there's evidence that if you use them and you use them with fidelity, then you will have growth. So we're asking all of our schools, all of our LEAs, to use the science of reading as their basis of improving reading. And with that, hopefully, we're looking right now at grades pre-K to 3. Hopefully that will reduce the number of students that you have going into special education programs who have lags in reading development if you're actually using this program to increase your literacy program. We think that these are some of the things that will happen as a result of using the science of reading. There will be a universal literacy screening 3 times a year, and that started last year. Students reading improvement plans, just like we have kids who have IEPs to improve their reading. Then I don't know if you all do this in direct instruction and in your schools, but for students who, once they've gone through the screening and there's an indication that they need additional support, a plan is developed with the parent for that student in reading so that we can stop the number of students who are leaving 2nd and 3rd grade who can't read. We've really got to address that. And then you get to this blame game, Roger. I'm serious. The middle school, the elementary teachers will blame the parents. The middle school teachers will blame the elementary school teachers. The elementary school, the high school teachers will blame the middle school teachers. And then the professors at college blame the high schools. So we've got to stop that train. And one of the ways that we can do that is to make sure all of our children are entering 4th grade as readers. We're also implementing the multiple tiered system of support and intervention. And I know that you've probably already been using that program. There's a policy in the state that will begin this year, 2027, that if a student is not reading at the 3rd grade level by 3rd grade, there's a possibility for retention. But remember, teachers, the retention means that you have actually created that reading plan, that you have implemented instructional strategies to support that student, and that you have had consistent contact with the parent regarding the lack of achievement by that student. But that is one of the plans this year. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is the Maryland pre-K to 12 math policy. Again, the standards have been rewritten for math policy, and that will be coming out for you if you don't have it already to implement in your classrooms. Again, you know, if you looked at the results of the math assessments in your schools, the scores are not really good. And again, as I've indicated, that Maryland dropped from 3rd to 9th. and mostly it was in that area of math. So we are again going to require that there's at least a 60-minute daily instruction in math in grades K to 8. There's also been a rearranging of the algebra content in terms of replacing the algebra project with algebra 1, and then geometry, and then algebra 2. So it would be more like the algebra 1 and 2 together, and then data analysis that leads to involvement there. Those are the 4 big rocks policies that the state is looking at this time. But we do need your help. As Alison indicated about the schools and being able to create new schools in Baltimore, it was legislators that we had to go and see. Part of your job as an educator is, yes, to instruct and give the best instruction for your students, but it is also to advocate for education. So when we call for you all to come to Annapolis to help us, I'm telling you there's a freeze right now on the money for the blueprint. You're going to have less money. When there's a call for teachers to come out to support educational policies in Annapolis, please join us. We need you. We need your support. And thank you again for allowing me to speak with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. It's a pleasure to have you here, and your wealth of expertise and career serving young people is really appreciated. One question before we go to Ken Shelton is I want to talk a little bit about with some of those initiatives you talked about, Irma, with with the science of reading or with coaching. How do you think about at the state level implementing strategies that are research-based strategies like that? They make sense across a state when you've got such different jurisdictions, different sizes. You've got urban, you've got rural, you've got different levels of readiness, you've got different levels of tenure of superintendents. Like, how does the state think about that?
So we actually, Alison, that's a very good question. And one of the things that we gave much thought to that. That's why there's a menu. So we're not saying to any LEA, you must use this or you must use that. But here's a menu of different strategies that you can use that are research-based, that if you use them, we would guarantee that you will have the results that you need. So we're not saying to any LEA, you must use this. But look, and if you come up with a different instructional strategies that are research-based that you feel that you can implement in your district that will give us the results that we need, you're more than well to use them. So we're not saying that you must, but here's some of the things that you need. But you can't go on Pinterest.
Okay, appreciate that. Okay, so very excited to introduce Ken Shelton. We zoomed in, as Irma said, to Baltimore. She zoomed us out to the state, and now we're going to zoom forward, looking at kind of the future of education. Ken is an expert in artificial intelligence and use of it in education. He does really exciting work around educational technology. He's a thought leader in this area, and he's a long track record of being committed to educational equity and using technology to help further that. So very excited to introduce Ken Shelton.
Thank you. Thank you. Are we good? Can y'all hear me? All right. Perfect. Good morning. Everybody good? All right, so before I begin, I want to, how many of you in the room, I'm going to assume that at least some of you, are familiar with the term and the concept of Sankofa? I got a few. For those of you that aren't, it means it's not taboo to go back and get what you lost. And the reason why I say that is, I'm going to connect some dots here, is the whole idea around using historical context to build a better future. So, watch this. There's something that will impact where funding gets allocated, how it's applied with instruction, and what we do with it, okay? And you want to know what that is? It's technology. And you might be like, oh, Ken, I don't know. Watch this, because I got receipts. What was happening from March of 2020 to September of 2020? And during that time period, there were many of us, me included, who were like, not as a flex, by the way. We were like, okay, remember all those years when we kept saying that we need to empower educators and students to have technology in their hands? And going one-to-one was for the privileged, and it was a luxury, not a necessity. And what happened? Oh my God, we got to do it. And by the way, let me add one more part to it. Thank you, one more part to it. It wasn't just the tech. It was, where was the funding allocated for the tech? It was, how was the tech aligned with instruction, and how was PD aligned with how teachers were actually using the tech? Because you're seeing it now with the vilification of screen time, and I'm like, it ain't the screens, it's what you're doing when you are on screen. Okay, so I share all that because part of it, I had the privilege of working on a task force for not our current, but our previous state superintendent, where back it was from 2010 to 2012, I was on the task force, and you can't make this up. 2010 or 2012, and the theme of the task force was literally, no child left offline. Yeah, that was 2010 to 2012, and what did we learn in 2020? It's not just digital inequity, it's a digital divide. And then, of course, for me, my background, I grew up in LA. I taught in LA Unified for almost 20 years. That's where I still live. And that's where I went to school. By the way, several of my teammates actually played for the Ravens. I'll tell you all that later. But nevertheless, one of them, his whole career, was Jonathan Ogden. But by the way, my point in sharing all of that with you is that if you look at where funding is allocated and how it's applied with a standards-based instruction, there are certain equity aspects that need to be considered. And again, for time's sake, I won't go through all of them right now, but even something as simple as digital redlining. Yeah. You know how I know that? Because in 2020 it was, well, we need to have the kids doing all this stuff online. I'm like, but you assume that they even have internet access. And you assume that they even have broadband internet access. So why am I sharing all that? Because it directly connects to another thing. How many of y'all heard about AI? All right, watch this. How many of you use AI knowingly? Yeah, you see, I'm going to throw that in there. And how many of you using it unknowingly? Everybody's hand should be going up right now. Why is that important? Because that is where a lot of the funding is being allocated right now, and that is where there is an effort to shoehorn it into our instructional practices. And my whole thing around technology is it's not so much the use of tech, it's how does tech remove anticipatory and historical barriers to teaching and learning? How does it serve as a catalyst for empowerment for teachers and for students? And how do we use it in the context of our learning environments that accelerates learning in ways that support learners in realizing their full potential, so that we don't have the college professors blaming the high schools, the high school teachers blaming the middle school teachers blaming elementary schools, and us trying to figure out where we're going to do our funding. So I'm going to ask y'all another question real quick. Who in the room believes that literacy is important? Okay, good. So now I've established common ground there. Here's the catch with this. So you saw where mine's supposed to be a national viewpoint. It's actually going to be national and global. The whole idea around literacy, for me growing up and for many of us in the room, it was probably the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, or often referred to as numeracy now. Those are important. Do you all believe that that's it? I'm calling y'all out. Y'all believe that that's it? No. This is how UNESCO defines literacy, and I love this definition for several reasons. One, a continuum of learning and proficiency in reading, writing, and using numbers throughout life. But the other part is to consider the expanded definition. It includes the encompassing of digital skills, media literacy, information literacy, skills necessary for sustainable development, global citizenship, and employment. And that's where I see a gap with many of the students in many of the school systems throughout this country. And yes, what is the pattern? It's many of the school systems that serve a predominantly historically excluded and marginalized student population. I don't see those right there. What I see is we're going to focus on literacy, reading, writing, arithmetic. But usually that's taught in what I would say antiquated pedagogical practices. It's not culturally responsive, it's not contextually relevant, and it's not empowering. But the whole idea here, if you'll notice that definition and the functional part, the contextual understanding, and the empowerment all serves a purpose. And so if we believe that literacy is important, which you all raise your hand to, then we also have to accept the fact that it has to extend beyond what I would say are the historical definitions of what that looks like. And yes, it does include the use of technology. Because the whole idea is, why is literacy important? It allows all of us to take flight. And I used to say this to my students all the time. And I'll share with you all how I define literacy this afternoon as well. So what does it do? The expanded definition, it supports us in meaning making. I even ask students all the time. So even when I taught, but even now, I ask students like, okay, so for example, because I taught math too, by the way, I'm like, so in your math class, what do you make of what you're learning? Like go beyond just the numerical calculations. What do you make of it? And oftentimes I get, I'm not sure. And in fact, one of the things I always bring up to educators that I want you all to consider to get in front of, which is one of the things, and by the way, I did not do this my first few years when I taught. And in fact, I'll be honest with you all, my first 5 years in a classroom was spent unlearning a majority of what I was taught in grad school. Because grad school was limited to theoretical and what should be versus what actual is. And I'm going to give you all an example of meaning making even when it comes to things like math. So when I was teaching students about probability, I'm like, all right, we're going to learn some of the functions with probability, but watch this. We're going to learn about probability in the context of the lottery. Yeah, y'all are probably like, what? Yeah. I go, okay, watch this. We're going to learn about probability because in California, it's public data. So, of course, I told the students, I'm like, you all really want to develop the skill set of a data scientist because then you will watch how when the math is mathing, the numbers don't lie and how those numbers can support you, but they can also be weaponized against you. The lottery is an example. And I said, so the provocation was, if I spend $5 per week playing the lottery, how much money will I totally spend, and at what point will the probability increase of me winning, and will my winnings at minimum recoup what I invested in? You see that? Now, you might say, oh, geez, can you do that? That was with 8th graders in algebra class. Why did it matter to them? Because they know the lottery, and now it's meaning making. I'm making meaningful value and contextual understanding of those numbers. For time's sake, I won't share with you all another one of my favorite projects, but it was to do a data analysis of the social, economical, environmental, and biological impact of living in a food desert. Yes, because almost every school that I taught at LA Unified at the time was a food desert. And if you're not familiar with a food desert, it was defined, the way we defined it, as a geographically identifiable area of which there is little to no access to healthy foods on a financial and geographical basis. And most of the schools where I taught, there was a liquor store, a fast food establishment, or a convenience store, a gas station convenience store on every block, but there was only one supermarket within a 3-mile radius of the school. That's the whole idea of an example of meaning making. Then with literacy, it's participation. I hear it all the time. We want students engaged. We want to engage. And y'all see later I'll have a thing. I'm not going to dispute engagement, but I always follow it up with, are we talking passive engagement or active engagement? Am I being schooled or am I learning? My goal as a teacher was, I want to go beyond that to investment and to ownership. I want you to be invested in your learning, and then by way of empowerment, I want you to take ownership of it. Because that's the goal. Continuing on, empowerment. Ask students, I do this all the time, what are the gifts you bring to the learning environment? In fact, here's one. Again, learning my lessons. My last 8 to 9 years in the classroom, and you'll hear later, the talk later about how I spent my last 10 years in the classroom getting in good trouble, hat tip to the late John Lewis, because I would do things like ask the students a question. One question was, what are the gifts that you actually bring to the learning environment? And I would watch the students struggle with that question because they were never asked that question. And in fact, my guess is most of you were never asked that question outside of a job interview. And so the whole idea is if you ask that and you understand that, that can lead to empowerment. And then, of course, it does connect to a global understanding, recognizing that while things may be hyper-local, trust me on this, I've had the privilege of working in more than 50 different countries, and I see a common through line depending upon what the country is. What happens locally impacts globally. What happens globally impacts locally, for sure. All of that fits into the context of literacy, and all of that fits into how we use technology, and all of that is going to be impacted by artificial intelligence. So what's happening right now is the following. So yes, I have a visual metaphor here because I used to teach students visual storytelling, and my main through line with visual storytelling was visual storytelling with a thematic focus on social commentary, okay? So obviously I'm referencing a movie here. This is what's happening when it comes to artificial intelligence, is we're being presented with only two options, the red pill or the blue pill, and that is the following. AI is a threat, nothing but fears, bans, and moral panic. There's a nostalgia for a pre-AI past. We're going back to blue books. I don't know if y'all saw that. I love it, where it was in the Wall Street Journal this last July. There was a whole article where college professors are going back to blue books because they're concerned about students cheating with AI. Okay? I'm gonna leave you all with, I have a story about blue books and myself in college that will dismantle that. Okay? Save that for this afternoon. And then, of course, we must stop this. And then there's the AI is inevitable, so in other words, you can't stop it, adoption without any degree of interrogation, efficiency over meaning, and we supposedly have no choice. Here's the problem with those. You can't see the text here. My text here is the real danger isn't choosing the wrong pill, it's believing that there's only two options. So, what do I mean by that? I'm going to take you all through another historical context. So how many of you, when you were in school, or maybe even you yourself, admit it, said the following: no, you cannot use blank because of blank, or no, the students cannot use blank because of blank? Wait for it. Wait for the next slide. Y'all ready? Y'all ain't ready. Y'all ready? Yes, I was a student that I was always asking my math teachers, can I use a calculator? And yes, 100% of the time they told me no. And these are the teachers that were telling me they were preparing me for my future. And the comment was always, are you going to have a calculator with you at all times when you get older? I also remember having this. Some of us go back to the old Apple IIe day. By the way, I learned computer programming on a Commodore 64. Oh, I got a few of my peeps in the room. Good. I also remember earlier this century, no, the students can't use Google. Why? Because they'll Google the answers. No, the students can't use Wikipedia because they'll just copy and paste. Which, by the way, I laughed at that. I'm aging myself a little bit because I remember copying and pasting, or actually copying out of my, my late grandmother's Encyclopedia Britannica. If you're in the room and you're like, Ken, what is Encyclopedia Britannica? That was an analog version of Wikipedia, all right? And then Web 2.0, even that. No, the kid can't use Web 2.0. Why? Because you don't know what they're going to put on the internet. Let me go back to those UNESCO digital skills, okay? That's what's been going on. This is what's happening with AI. And so the whole idea is this resistance to educational technology. And by the way, history does repeat itself over and over and over again. It'll make us lazy, we should ban it. Well, maybe it's okay. It can actually change things. Now I feel empowered. This happens over and over and over and over. And the whole idea is it's what I always say is to quote, I went to UCLA, so I like to quote many of my coaches or UCLA. So in my case, he wasn't my coach, but the late John Wooden. Okay, John Wooden used to have among his many quotes. One was, "Be quick, but don't hurry." okay? We can be quick to learn, but not hastily do things. That's the whole idea of how we get to that transformation and that empowerment, and that even applies in the current context, even with artificial intelligence. Let me understand how it works. Does it do things that, does it allow me to do things that I want to be able to do better? Does it inhibit things that I want to be able to do better? The whole idea is it's not a blue or a red pill. It's not a binary choice. It's recognizing that if this is the pattern, how do we break this cycle? Here's one. I have a grid for you. Many of these will look familiar to you all, and especially the initial reaction. And what you're seeing right here is why education innovation is one of my top 3 oxymorons. Because every time there is a potential disruptor, the usually immediate response is resistance. It's denial, it's ban, it's block. Now, I'll let you all fill in the blank as to who those bans, who those blocks, and who that denial of access adversely affects the most. But the bottom line is you see that when given the time to critically think about certain technologies and how they impact what we do, that's where you get into the transformation and redefinition of our learning environments. And so the big push with AI right now is we've got to get it. It's got to be faster, 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 okay? And what I always say is, you know, again, be quick but don't hurry. Faster is not always better, okay? So here are some questions for you all to consider when it comes to really technology, but even our artificial intelligence. What counts as learning? Who benefits? Who decides? What barriers exist? And what must we protect? You see, hopefully you all are seeing, I'm always in the shades of gray when it comes to technology. I'm not going to be all in with blinders, and I'm not going to be all out with barriers. Let me thoughtfully navigate through. And again, I'll go more in detail this afternoon, but I would ask you all these things because oftentimes what counts as learning is not necessarily, it's an old, I believe it was an Alvin Toffler quote that, or no, I forgot who it was. It's sometimes, not everything that measures counts and not everything that counts is measured. That's not Toffler. Who was that? Jeez. I'll get it for y'all later. I could Google it, by the way. Or I could ask AI. The whole point here is to consider those things. And so the whole idea, as I work my way to conclude here, is that my encouragement to you all is definitely to reject the binary thinking, recenter learning, and reclaim your agency. What do we do that tech and AI specifically cannot and should not replace, but then how might it help us recenter learning and reclaim agency? You brought up some statistics, and I know this all the time, especially with teachers. One of the more definitive reasons why you're seeing such a significant attrition rate with teachers is burnout. Whole nother talk I have, but I will tell you all that's one of the reasons why I literally had no choice but to leave the classroom, literally for my own survival. And I bring this up all the time to leaders. Do you not realize that there's research, which I sent it to them, that oftentimes teachers spend more than half of their time doing things that aren't essential functions of what they do. In other words, you spend a lot of time doing clerical things as opposed to actual teaching. So that's where I say that's where we want the technology potentially to slot in. Whole thing that I saw this quote where it was like, I don't want AI to do my writing for me. I want AI to do my laundry for me so I can spend more time writing. And so how does AI fit into that puzzle? Number one, it's us recalibrating what we do. It's looking at what are pedagogically sound and foundational things that we do, and how does that fit into that? One of the things that, and I'll bring it up later, but I hear, hopefully you all have heard the term cognitive offloading, okay? And if you haven't, that's a fear that many educators have and people have in general, that I'm going to let AI do my thinking for me. Part of me with the recalibration goes back to that definition you saw with UNESCO, and we'll do some activities on this later, is if I recalibrate learning, I'm not going to have AI do my thinking for me, but I am going to have it maybe help me foster different ideas, may help me develop talking points to question things. But I'm also going to develop a digital awareness that I'm not going to believe everything that it tells me. And I'll go more into that this afternoon. But it's really looking at, again, recalibrating what we do. And so the whole idea, as I work to the conclusion here, is for you all to reject the jazzy jargon. There was a friend of mine in California, I don't know if it still exists, I'll have to look it up, but he actually created a website that was the Education Jargon Generator. And you're like, wait a minute, we get inundated with jargon and acronyms. And I'll give you an example of that. A couple of years when I taught, there was a big focus in LA Unified on rigor. I'm like, okay. How do you define it? I always do that. And I'll never forget, at the school I worked at the time, the administration was like, well, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. Okay, well, that reminded me of William Rehnquist. I'm wondering if anyone knows that part. Okay, I'll let y'all. The whole idea is, if you don't define it and give a contextual example, then it becomes jazzy jargon, or what I describe as it becomes a mindless platitude. We have to define terms and then apply them in context. And then again, that connects to the mindless platitudes. I am not a tool-first person. Yes, I am an educational technologist, but I am not a tool-first person. I am a human-centered person first, and then map the tools to the experience that I want educators and learners to have. And then the whole false urgency, which is, oh my God, if you don't do it now, you're already behind. Not true. You are where you are. The whole idea is, where are we now and where do we want to be? What we do want to embrace are these things: the critical thinking aspect, the sense making of it, ethical reasoning. That's a whole big one that I'll talk more about this afternoon. And then for you all, it's the professional judgment. The question I always pose to educators is, if you want to use AI to personalize education, before we get to the AI, tell me about your learners. Because if you can't answer that question, AI is not going to fill in that blank for you. In fact, it actually might cause more harm if you don't do that. What are they like? What are their needs? What are their opportunities for growth? I'm a big believer in asset framing of terminology, not deficit. I used to have students say to me, you know what, I'm deficient in blank, and I'm like, no, you're not deficient. That's an opportunity for growth. There's a difference. We're going to flip that around. Like, you can't be good at everything, so the areas where there is an opportunity that you need improvement is an opportunity for growth, okay? So I'll finish off with the following. AI should be in service of and not a replacement for you and what you do. We do want to think about all of those things in the context of meaningful teaching and learning, and how it will impact students and how it will impact all the areas of instruction that you all just saw with Dr. Johnson's presentation, and even how we might advocate for where funding is allocated around those things. And then reject that binary approach. And then my last question or provocation for you all is the following: is what are the foundational learning practices your learning community must protect, no matter what technology comes next? How can AI be designed to serve those rather than distract or detract from them? So more this afternoon, and thank you all very much.
Thank you, Ken. It was wonderful. You obviously got a lot of fans here, especially, I think, the laundry, doing your laundry. It was my biggest fan. I'm your biggest fan for that. I guess my first question for you, Ken, is so I love the idea of finding a third way and not the red pill or the blue pill. So what is your biggest fear if we aren't able to, finding a third way? We know there's lots of benefits to educational technology. There's also lots of risk, and we're a cell phone ban district. Hampstead Hill was one of the first schools in the system that did that effectively. We've seen real benefits from that. So we know some of the risks, we know some of the benefits. What is your fear kind of us failing to find the third option, and like what will go wrong?
So a couple of things. One is my stance on cell phones has changed. Mm-hmm. So I was an advocate for cell phones in schools from 2008 to about 2018. And I'll even go back to why has my stance on that shifted now? COVID. The reason why I was an advocate for that was because there were many school districts of which they couldn't afford to go one-to-one with devices, but students had access to cell phones. COVID showed that we need to have student devices. So I'm now an advocate for thoughtful restrictions of cell phone use in classrooms because they have turned into a distraction. Now, you mentioned what's the danger? Let's use the cell phones. How well regulated are we as adults or students when it comes to the use of our digital devices? Okay? What are the dangers that we know exist around social media that, let me say this, but I'm also going to say that one of the problematic things I find with education is not education itself, is that many of society's ills get placed at the feet of education that is historically underfunded, under-resourced, and under-supported, yet we bear the brunt of all of society's ills. Yeah. So I say that because the whole idea of the danger of not looking at that third option is it's layered. So one is, when I see draconian bans, I don't say whether it's right or wrong, I just ask, then what valuable digital skills are students potentially losing out on? Because in the end, the reality is we live in a digitally connected world, and it will even become more digitally connected, and there's a reason why that UNESCO definition is dynamic with respect to digital skills. The other thing is for students to develop an awareness of how and when technology is helpful versus when it could be harmful. I do that all the time with AI. I say to students, I know you use it. My question is, if I were to draw a continuum, I use it to help me with my learning. Then there's a line. It's replacing my thinking. Where's that line for you? Because if you don't know, that's something that they should know. And it's also, I have another story later, but it's also things like, you all know that AI is used to calculate your credit score. See, it permeates our lives whether we want it to or not. And so even something as rational as Ken has 9 different credit cards and he only uses 2. Well, then why do you have so many credit cards? Get rid of the others. Because I know the game of my credit score. The minute I start closing those accounts, my credit score will actually go down. So it's understanding, again, it's relevant context. It's understanding all of those things that, that are necessary for us and for our students to recognize that, yes, this technology, it's a Voltaire quote I used to share with my students that was popularized in Spider-Man. And it's, with great power comes great responsibility. And I'm like, technology gives us great power, but it also requires great responsibility. And if you're not responsible in your use, then it can shape what you think, it can shape how you feel, and it can also determine the decisions that you make for yourself that you have essentially offloaded rather than asserting your own agency.
Okay, so I'm going to now bring in the audience. So using technology, we did get questions from everybody. So I'm going to try to bring the audience in with some of their questions. I think maybe two questions. Okay, I'm being told, yeah, because we're at the end here. So, so for all of you, I guess one question is, thinking about the last 30 years in education, where we've seen a variety of trends. Which trend do you think was the most beneficial for our schools? Any one of you? Yeah.
I think creating ILTs. Mm-hmm. Because as a principal, I know there is a heavy lift all the time. But if you have thought partners in the work, it makes individuals feel that they're a part of the process, that they have some skin in the game. So creating the ILTs gave teachers and other staff members the ability to say, this is how we want our students to behave, this is how we want our students to learn, this is how we want to create the culture in our school that's a culture of everybody learning, not just students, but students, principals, and teachers. So I think that's a great effort for us in schools, the ILTs.
Great.
You want to go? I can go.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the trends that I would like to see even more amplified is, and again, I'm using technology as the conduit here, is building, it kind of connects on Dr. Johnson's building community. Like all of us in this room, if you think about it, we're here together. This is a community, but for the use of the term community, is not limited to the walls of this physical space. It's using technology to find your people. It's sharing ideas. I'm in the classroom, and I always say that it's interesting how in education, how much we say we value collaboration, but yet it can be very isolating and very lonely. You think about it, you go to your classroom, you close the door. You go to a faculty meeting, there isn't enough emphasis on community building so that you recognize that, and I'm sure this is true for many of the folks in this room, because I know it was for me, there were many times where I was like, am I the only one experiencing this? And then, of course, when I started looking towards my PLN, my Professional Learning Network, I realized, like, oh no, what you're experiencing is actually everybody, is normal. But so then once you do that, it's like, okay, then what are the strategies that others have done to either overcome feelings of isolation or even something as simple as I designed a lesson plan that didn't land as, it didn't meet my expectations, but it's not an indictment on me because others have had to go through, walk similar paths. So I do think that trend around building community that is not limited to the physical or geographical boundaries, I think that's a trend that I would like to see. I would like to see it accelerated and amplified further.
This is a hard one for me to answer, in part because I think one of the challenges in education and with trends is it just swings a pendulum very far, and we lose what's on the other side of it. And I don't think we're always good in education at sort of finding the middle. We overcorrect or we move too far in one direction or another. So trends worry me in that way because they come and go, and we lose some of the learning of what's been in the past. When I think about this, though, what I think is very different, and to me matters a lot, and it had a lot to do with how I entered the profession, is we've thought more about how people can enter this profession. And there's been a lot of work done to think about how we attract more people to the profession of education and how people come into this field. And I would imagine if we went through this room, many of you came in through very traditional pathways. Some of you came in through alternative pathways. Some of you came in as career changers. And opening up the world of education for people who want to enter it through multiple pathways was very, very new when I entered the profession. And people were incredibly skeptical of it. And I think that one of the things we've seen, and there's really good data on this, because there's been so much debate about how people enter the profession, and there was some research done that showed we're just having the wrong discussion. That you can look at how one enters the profession, and you are going to have very effective teachers no matter how they entered the profession. You're going to have ineffective teachers no matter how they entered the profession, and you're going to have a bunch who are growing and moving in that direction. And the debate around how one enters the profession is the wrong debate. How we continue to grow people in the profession, no matter how they entered, is the conversation we should be having. So I think that trend is something I like.
Okay, thank you. So for our last question, I'm going to try to combine some questions or some of the sentiments from questions that I've seen. So one is people, wanting to know, of course, what we see the next 30 years looking like. And another question is about what, if you had to pick one thing that every classroom should have, what would that be? And I guess so thinking about in terms of how quickly the landscape is changing and understanding that over the next 30 years, how it's going to change, what is that one thing that you would want every school, what is the one strategy or thing that you would want every classroom to have?
So I can't think about classrooms, but I do think about teachers. And I do think one thing that every teacher would like to have is a second set of hands. And knowing that, you know, we really can't do that, but one of the things that was included, no, listen to me. One of the things that was included in the blueprint was to make sure that teachers had enough common planning time.
Yeah.
So, and that was actually frozen in the blueprint because we don't have enough teachers at this time to give you all the time that you need. Who doesn't want to not take work home in the evening and work all evening and then come back early in the morning and start working again? So having common planning time for teachers so that they could actually do what other professions do, work during their work hours and go home and relax, something that we don't do. So that's one of the things that I think that every teacher wants. And if teachers have that, then we can make sure that they're up and ready and to go with our students and everybody's on board. Common planning time or another set of hands for teachers.
Yeah. For me, actually, it's in two parts. So the first part is probably going to get in good trouble. Why is it that education is the only public service industry of which we are told to do more with less? We don't say that to our policemen, our police departments. We don't say that to our fire departments. Yet I would happily have a debate with anybody that if we were to contend and agree that police and fire are essential public services, then you can't exclude education out of that as well. So for me, I'm a big advocate for we shouldn't have to do more with less. We shouldn't be told to go the extra mile. In fact, I used to say this. I'm like, there's two places I won't go, the extra mile or above and beyond. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Because there's a direct correlation between that and lack of efficacy and burnout, okay? Now, with that being said, to even what you heard earlier, I would just ask all of you this question, and it's just something for you to consider, and I don't want you to take it as a burden that you carry on your shoulders, but I know for me, going back to the sustainability of the profession, okay, if you were to ask kids about their experiences, and I would ask you about your experiences, you've got two options. Would you describe schooling for you as survival or thrival, okay? And I already know what the answer is for most of us. So that is a sustainably long-term investment that if we provide learning environments of which our youth are thriving, then you increase the likelihood of them adding to their list of things for the future of being an educator. But if it is survival, you decrease that likelihood, because why on earth would we choose a profession that treated many of us, me included, in such a way that I describe my schooling, including higher ed, as survival, not thrival?
Yeah, I mean, yes to both of what's been said. Like, yes to all of that. Again, sorry, this one, like, because I've spent my entire career in and around Baltimore City, so when I hear that question, honestly, like, my first instinct is like, you know, heat. Air conditioning, yeah. Right? Like, that's what I wish every classroom had. When I think about it more globally, it is something I think a lot about in my own life is, does my conscience and my conduct align? And when we talk as a society about how important education is, there are so many decisions that get made along the way that tell us that is absolutely not true. It is not important. We just talked about the fact that we are about to freeze spending on education.
No, we're not about to.
It is happening, right? I run a relatively small organization, right? And what anybody would tell me is, if you want to understand the priorities of an organization, look at their budget. Correct. Their budget will tell you what their priorities are. What you allocate your resources to will tell you what your priorities are. So when I think about school and education, and I think about our society, and we say over and over and over again that education is important, to adequately and sufficiently fund an education that allows us to do what we know is right for kids is what I wish we had in every classroom.
All right. Well, thank you all. I think we should give we're really fortunate to have such a well-experienced and thoughtful group of education leaders here to inform us today. So a warm round of applause for our speakers.
All right, in a minute, Brianna's going to get up here and kind of give you some logistics, but we couldn't let this opportunity go by without recognizing Alison with a special award. And we debated what to call it. Brianna thought the dedication to service and leadership, I'm sorry I made that. I thought Warrior Queen, the Warrior Queen Award, but I think what we can all agree on is that she's formidable. She has her fingers in lots of, just the work that this woman has produced these years is something. And can we all agree that she is a big cheese? She is a big cheese. So for our big cheese, she has a cheese board, and on it says, "For a great big cheese, thank you, Alison, for 30 years, and 2 bottles of Sauvignon Blanc, which I hear from Sam is your favorite." There you go. You're a great big cheese. There you go. That's what he told Anna. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody. Oh, yeah. You're very welcome. And now, Brianna, to wrap it up.
Thank you, everyone. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like this is the best Leading Minds we've done since I've been here. I don't know about the others. But I want to just, again, thank our panelists, thank Alison. This was really, I had a wonderful time. I don't know about the rest of you, but it was very, very engaging and delightful. Just a couple of quick reminders. First of all, panelists, I do want pictures after, so please stay around for that. Principals, same thing. If you're a principal, come down here because we want to take pictures. We are a little over time. Apologize about that. So it's 10:44 right now. Your breakout session's starting at 10:45. So let's push that back. Give everybody a chance to go to the bathroom and get refreshments and that kind of stuff. So let's say 10:55. Is that? You think so? Okay. Or 11 o'clock. Let's say 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock. Go to your breakout sessions. Okay, so each breakout session is set up for 40 people at a max, okay? You were supposed to register ahead of time, so please find your email. That's the email address it should have come from if you don't remember what session you signed up for. If you weren't able to register for some reason, Charlotte is outside at the table. Talk to her. We do have spaces still available in sessions, but the people that registered should get first dibs. So just making sure that we are not taking somebody else's spot. There is a sign-in sheet in all of the breakout rooms. Please make sure you sign in. That is how we're taking attendance today. The break area is open all day for your refreshments. We're having lunch at 12:15. I'm losing them. In the dining hall. And then at the end of the day at 1:30, come back here. Ken is going to talk again. It's going to be amazing. Thank you.
Good job.